Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. Our topic of discussion tonight is how will the IMF program help Sri Lanka's economic recovery? This is actually the time that we wish we focused more during economics lectures in class, in school. Our guest tonight will help us understand the nuances, the implications in a fun manner, I hope. I'm pleased to welcome Shiran Fernando, Chief Economist of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Good evening and welcome back to the show, Shiran.
Thank you, Sonali. I think you had me almost 8 months ago, and
Correct.
Now we're here.
Absolutely. And so earlier this week, the International Monetary Fund provided the extended fund facilities to Sri Lanka. Lots going on. We need to talk about how Sri Lanka must now put in place an implementation mechanism, implement tough structural reform, policy reform, ascribe responsibility, have targets, monitor it, ensure that we really tick the boxes that we've sort of undertaken to tick with the IMF. We also need to talk about the social safety net because people can't be left in hunger. So a lot to sort of understand, comprehend, and it's so important that we do understand and that we're not just bystanders to our lives. So as a sort of introduction to this whole conversation in very simple language, please, could you help us understand what this is all about?
Sure. So this is, in my opinion, an international institution throwing the country a lifeline in terms of getting back credibility, signaling that we are willing to do the hard yards in terms of economic reform. It's the mandate of institutions like the IMF to help countries when they don't have dollars, when they're not able to service their debt, to come to institutions like this. And of course, it's the 17th time we're going to the IMF, and I think everyone says, okay, why are we going again? Because we've not done well on the last 16 times. But I think it's mainly us that have, even if you look at the past, not really completed programs, or we've done maybe a little bit of the stabilization on the macro side of it in the first 2 years, and then either we've had elections or we've kind of, unraveled things. And we've delayed, as you mentioned, structural reforms. Now, what is that? It could be reforms on legislation, on governance, on state-owned enterprise reform, on welfare benefits. So many things that we've kind of put on the back burner, which we've not really done along with an IMF program. And I think it's historic that it's coming in March because it was probably 3 years too late. Because if you look at the pandemic period in March 2020, there was a real opportunity at that point even to go to the IMF because at that point vulnerable countries like Sri Lanka, which had a budget deficit, also ran what we call current account or balance of payments deficits, and also countries that looked like they had a lot of debt to repay because everyone knew from 2020 onwards we had about 4.5 billion that we needed to repay on top of all these other deficits. So it exposed countries like that, but the IMF had a solution at that point even, and that was a rapid financing instrument solution, which we didn't really successfully get. In 2022, we went and depreciated the currency without a plan, and then really had the plan after that, and the last 12 months has been really, we've gone almost a 180 from having no dollars to now at least having some level of dollars where the central bank is now purchasing dollars and improving reserves. So it's interesting 12 months, but we've kind of delayed it, and we could have avoided it even before 2020, and maybe we can get into that.
Right. Now, this time around, we actually, you used the word lifeline. The IMF threw us a lifeline. So Sri Lanka was in dire straits, and we physically felt it as well with all of the economic crises that we experienced during the last few months. Shiran, but now we have India and China on board this journey of debt restructuring. The Paris Club has endorsed Sri Lanka's road to debt sustainability. And now we have the support of the IMF, which is by way of the extended fund facility. So it is something that needs to be very delicately handled because it's not just a matter of getting the money and partying, right? So what's the journey from the point of receiving the monies to, you know, the next few steps?
Sure. So there are two things to unpack from what you just said. If you look at the last 16 times, it was just an IMF program. We have to do it and then we'll kind of stabilize.
Okay.
But this time around, it's the IMF program which has to go hand in hand with your debt restructuring, because it's the first time we are restructuring our debt. So both need to balance. If you look at the program, it's only going to be there for 4 years between now and 2027. But our restructuring is going to be pretty much maybe over 9 to 10 years. So we have to really stay the course. We can't deviate, because then it'll get us back to the same point where we'll have to restructure or go back to the IMF. But the program is, I would say, it has KPIs. And it has, I would say, every 6 months you have KPIs. So, for example, our next KPI, we've got the first disbursement, which is about 330 million. The next KPI lot is in June. So there are things we need to achieve, the country needs to achieve, the legislation needs to achieve. And if we do that, then we get the next tranche in September. Like that, December, June and December, there will be a KPI review. And then you get your disbursements about 2 or 3 months later. So it keeps us in check. And it's a good thing in a way, because we can't afford the program also to stall. Because the moment you stall the program, the bilaterals, like you mentioned, China, India, our commercial creditors, they will get jittery. And they will not be very convinced that we are doing the right things as well. So as you said, the word delicately, we need to very delicately, manage it. But countries have done it. We're not the only country to really default on our debt and go through an IMF program and manage it successfully. So many others have done it. But it's really prioritizing the different anchors of the program. So you have, things related to the tax policy, the fiscal side, you have state-owned enterprise reform, you have welfare benefits, and more interestingly, you have a lot this time in terms of governance and corruption, which is inbuilt into the program, which we have not seen in past programs and probably in this region as well. It's a first for IMF. So I think they also realize that we have failed so many times in the past, and that we need to hold, we can't just give you easy money and a lifeline and you do difficult things in 1 to 2 years and then you kind of go away from the path. So
let's speak a bit about the political impetus, because now essentially to sort of understand this program at its core requires technical knowledge and skills, and not every policymaker is going to have it, but they are ultimately the decision makers. So, but we have so many incredible experts, economists, international economists who are willing to sort of assist in this whole process, who have a really good understanding of how we need to sort of handle this situation properly. How is that going to take place?
Sure.
Because politically, it may be disadvantageous to sort of, adhere to this, comply with this.
Sure. So I think that's what's important, because the legislators, at the end of the day, what's their KPI? Happy voters, right? And getting re-elected. What have we done in the last few years? Gone the total opposite way. So I think and now people understand. I think people, because of the crisis, people understand a little bit more about debt.
Yeah.
They understand, when interest rates rise, when interest rates fall, there's a little bit more awareness.
Yes.
and the whole debt thing. So I think no longer can people or politicians or policymakers hide behind, excuses saying, oh, the IMF is wanting us to do this, but it's actually we have to do it, because a lot of what is in the program are things that we have asked for, that we need to implement. I think definitely there needs to be more consensus building, educating the Parliament, even things like, you have the Financial Management Responsibility Act, which was passed 20 years ago. That in simply, has a limit of what fiscal deficit should be, what your government liability should be, what your central government debt should be, and it, has a set of rules. But what happens every year is the Parliament goes and lifts the deficit ceiling or lifts the public debt ceiling, and we don't hold that accountable. So the legislation in that sense has not really done its part. So when the fiscal deficit goes up, who finances it? It's the central bank. And why does that happen? Because we don't the legislation doesn't support an independent central bank because you have the Secretary to the Treasury sitting on the monetary board, and when you need money, central bank could print and provide that as well. So the system hasn't worked, and I think we are now slowly correcting it. There's a public finance management legislation that will come in. So that is a really good way to explain to the policymakers, the legislators, why you need these balances. The monetary law, the bill is in Parliament as well, and it will go up for debate as well. So I think those are important tools to explain ourselves out of it, because I think at the end of the day, because it's a 10-year period, it could be, multiple governments, multiple policymakers coming in, but at the end of the day, the country has to move forward. We can't come back to a situation like we had in 2022.
Yeah. So one of the key things that's been spoken of is central bank independence, and we've heard this phrase over and over again. How feasible is that looking in the near future?
So in the current legislation, as I mentioned, the biggest issue that we've had is what we call, as an economist, I try not to be too technical, is the fiscal dominance of monetary policy. Basically, as I mentioned, when the government is short of money, they will rely on the central bank to either print or lend that, so that they can pay maybe public sector salaries, they can pay pensions, whatnot. But that happens mainly because the Secretary to the Treasury sits on the monetary board. The new legislation removes that. It brings about a process to appoint the governor. It has a separate governing board which manages the operations of the central bank. It has a separate independent monetary board as well, which will have not only economists but people who are looking at the financial sector system, risk management, things like that, which are needed in a modern central bank. But the most important thing is it's moving towards inflation targeting, which is what a lot of global central banks have used to contain not only inflation but to set monetary policy. And even that, there is a process of the minister and the central bank deciding what the target should be. And for example, if there's a deviation, the central bank has to report it to Parliament as well. So there's a lot of accountability inbuilt as well.
Can you elaborate on inflation targeting?
Sure. So it's basically where you have a rate at which the central bank will say this is where we want inflation to be. So for example, they say 10%. So you set your policy rates, the way you determine money supply around that. Because right now what we look at is factors like economic growth, how much do we need to stimulate the economy, what is like credit growth, for example, to the private sector. So it's not done in a manner where we have a singular kind of target. So here you center it around your inflation, which is a factor of other things as well, which is what people have to face when they go to the retail store and all of that. So it's around that targeting, which a lot of countries have managed to keep inflation under manageable levels, even in periods where inflation is rising and global prices are rising.
Okay. Let's speak a bit about predatory lending also, the role of China, for example, the projects that we've sort of had to undertake with the Chinese government. We have the Port City project, the Hambantota Port, now the Hambantota Harbour. These need to now generate revenue, right? So when we speak about revenue generation for the government, instead of just looking at sending off our men and women to work as housemaids and drivers to the Middle East and other places, and also, I mean, the brain drain, how can we use these massive gargantuan projects to sort of generate revenue for the country now that we have them here?
Correct. So I think we can't look at the past and keep blaming them, and as you said, we need to make use of it. So I think they are the factor which can really catalyze is our strategic location.
Yeah.
Because you have these infrastructure assets which can cater to the South Asian market, namely India. And if you look at where the next stage of growth is going to really come, both from a trade point of view and economic growth, and from a middle income growth as well, it's going to be centered around India. So how can you use the port better to maybe do more transshipment? Can we be like a Singapore to China, for example? Can we, there's a booming market in south of India towards electronics. Can we be not manufacturing the whole thing, but maybe particular components within it? So there are options around it, but I think the policy environment needs to come in. And when you show those options, then you will show alternative options for people who would want to migrate or go to the Middle East, as you mentioned, or to South Korea or Japan and things like that. Because I think there are really good exporters in Sri Lanka who are catering to world-class organizations. They might be doing maybe one or two things for that as part of the supply chain. But what they're really losing out is the labor. And you can't really train some of these skilled workers who might move to another country to do something completely different as well. So I think it's resource mobilization, using our strategic location, and then being able to create jobs which are productive. And then you will generate the revenue that is required, because what we did in the last decade was more debt-fueled infrastructure spending. What we need to do in this decade is really export-led investment, which can cater to the region, because the opportunities is here.
Now, all these conversations at policy level, at boardrooms, in forums such as these, usually are in English, usually are at an academic level, usually watched by English-speaking audiences. But if you can help us translate this into how does this IMF program assist in ensuring less hungry mouths to feed? Let's speak about the social safety net aspect of this IMF program, because ultimately, Shiran, nothing matters if your children are starving, if they don't have a school to go to, etc. So let's speak about the humane issues that are faced by the masses.
Sure. So if you look at what the program does and what the country wants to do, not only with the IMF but with the World Bank also assisting, is, of course, we have Samurdhi, which is the main welfare program. I think close to about 1.8 million right now get it. But what the government, and there are a lot of issues with it, because not everyone who really deserves it get it, and those who really deserve it don't get it as well. And sometimes the money can get lost in translation, or it's not going to the right person. So what the government has done, I think, over the last 12 months is create what you call a social registry, where if you need support, you need help, or you feel like you need an income, whether you were laid off, maybe you were in the informal sector, you can go and register. So I think we've had close to about 3.9 million people who've registered in this social registry. Really? So you can see from 1.9 million, the crisis, pandemic, all of that has put maybe 2 to 3 million more people in poverty, or at least in need of support. So after that, what you do is you have to validate it, because you can't simply maybe take what people are saying. Maybe there are other jobs that they're working on. So I think right now maybe about 1.3 or 1.4 has been validated. So we need to validate the rest. And then there will be support, I think, from the World Bank and the IMF towards these transfer programs, so that they will get it direct to either their account, or you don't have the middleman or people in the middle as well. So I think this is a good thing, because previously we were spending 60 billion rupees on Samurdhi from the budget, and maybe about 30-40 billion was actually going to the people who really deserved it. So in this way, we are targeting better. We're ensuring people who deserve it get better. Of course, there's another level we can go, which is the digitization route, which India has used through the Aadhaar system and things like that, which will take some time to do it, and you need to do it well. But they have shown 1.2 billion people, if you need social transfer or if you need some level of protection, it's done quite instantly through through the technology that's put in. So I think there are 2 steps to it. Maybe the initial thing is people are suffering, cost of living has gone up, they need some help, and I think the registry will help that. But I think the next stage is the digitization side, which will completely reduce the transaction costs and also maybe whatever is lost also in the middle.
One of the other aspects that is addressed is addressing corruption vulnerabilities. You said that this is the first time that this whole addressing corruption vulnerabilities has been sort of addressed by the IMF program in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lankan society and corruption kind of go hand in hand, unfortunately. So how important is it to bring about new legislation, and then again, bringing about legislation is one thing, but again, ensuring implementation is another. Speak to us about this aspect as well,
Sure.
the importance of it.
Sure. So I think the big outcry from the people and from civil society and even us from the private sector is, of course, better governance. One of the reasons maybe we are not seeing the level of FDI or investment is because people have a question mark over the governance and, am I going to get this piece of permit done in a normal manner compared to, say, if I go to Singapore, how many loopholes do I have to jump through? So that's the broad issue, and of course people face different things at the ground level as well. So this part of the program is really to do a governance audit, and it's really to check, especially on the tax administration side, on the customs side, then in terms of money laundering, things like that, terrorist financing, all of that. So there are different components in this governance audit that the IMF will undertake. The good thing is that the report also will be made public, so it will expose or ensure that the weaknesses are shown, and that's a good thing, so that civil society, all of us can analyze it and push for the real change to happen. The other support which has actually been happening in the last 6 to 12 months is the assistance from the IMF in terms of the anti-corruption legislation, which is, I think, now going to go before Parliament as well. So there was a lot of technical assistance that the IMF played in that, their legal teams and all of that, providing our legal folks within government that assistance. So I think even that is key. But as I said, even with the Fiscal Management Responsibility Act, we could have prevented this crisis. Even though we get this legislation through, it's really, as you said, the implementation of it. So I think the more we kind of strengthen legislations like this, the more that there are less loopholes and gaps, the more that we can implement it and ask for that accountability. And the other aspect, I think, is on the procurement side, which is a key thing, because procurement has a lot of issues, both in terms of the delays it has, in terms of getting things when really required, and of course the costs and whether it's done rightly as well. So I think moving towards a better procurement system, better procurement guidelines, all of that, I think, will be really key within this program as well.
State-owned enterprise reform, SOE reform, is another one of the boxes we need to tick of the IMF, undertakings to the IMF. We all know that the public sector is massive, but we don't pay the right people for their skills. There are questions about efficiency, a lot of problems within the public sector itself. Do you think it's even possible to, because it's such a mess, you can't just ask people to leave. You need to, I don't know, repurpose or resize, but how do you do it without it affecting people badly?
So it's a difficult thing to do it in that sense, but I think what the program and what I think we have a state-owned enterprise agency as well, what they will focus on is the commercial SOEs, which either collects revenue or whatever, or if they make losses, is a drain on the state. Of course, use more people than they should, really underutilizes assets, things like that. And within that, I think there are maybe 120 to 130 of these commercial state-owned enterprises. Part of it is improving is increasing competition. So if you look at something like the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, one aspect of it is the way the CPC provides jet fuel for the airplanes. Earlier it was a monopoly, where the CPC is the only one that can provide to any airline. But now I think the steps have been taken to open that up, to introduce competition, where if a particular airline wants to bring in their own supplier in, they just need to get a license, they can use the infrastructure, and potentially CPC makes more money doing that than procuring the fuel. So some of it is, not really divesting, but really introducing competition, letting the market forces determine it. The other ones is sometimes you have certain regulators which are also operators. So for example, if you look at the Ports Authority, they're also a regulator and they're also an operator if you look at the Colombo Port. So those kind of things you need to unbundle. Then there are, of course, several entities that are the big loss-making ones. Not all SOEs are loss-making. I think that's also something very important to understand. Some of them do make sizable profits. Some of them also have a social element to it. But even these loss-making ones, I think it's important to understand what is the subsidy component to it, so that you can break out the efficiency problem. Like if you remove the subsidy, what part of the loss is the inefficiency causing? So I think those are also steps being taken. And then the other, I think the more crucial part, which is probably making the headlines now, is the divestment strategy, which is identifying what assets. It could be even profit-making ones, but the question to ask is does it make sense for government to be in this business? Does it make government sense to run a hospital, for example? Not hospital, sorry, run a hotel, for example. So you look at that and say, okay, what can be done? So, and even that you need a transparent process. So I think that's what the agency is looking at, and also the governance aspect, so that you ensure that you don't invite your kith and kin to the boards, but there is a whole process of appointments to these SOEs, because that's also part of the loss-making element. So it's a very ambitious thing. We have tried to do that. We were successful a lot in the 90s doing a lot of SOE reform. If you look at the telecom industry, one of the reasons we are doing well in that sector and very competitive and leading ahead of the game in the region is because of the reform that took place there. Same with the port. We opened up as well, introduced competition. Now you have private players, even though you have the regulator there as well. So I think we need to find a few catalysts, show a bit of quick wins on this, and then generate the momentum to do a lot more of the reform, and then get to what you said in terms of the workforce and all of that. I think looking at the workforce alone is a big thing, and it can deviate from some of the other elements which can catalyze and use the existing workforce.
Okay, super. We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
නැගිටිමු ශ්‍රී ලංකා සතියේ දිනවල උදෑසන 7ට.
Across all walks of life, listening to the people, visiting door to door, witnessing the truth firsthand. This is the heart of the village. Gammada, for the people, by the people.
Welcome back here with the People's Platform. We're in conversation with Shiran Fernando, Chief Economist of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. We're discussing how the IMF program can help Sri Lanka's economy get back on track. In terms of being solution-oriented, Shiran, how can Sri Lanka's economy go about innovatively generating more dollars? Because I think that's one of the key aspects that we need to look at.
Sure. So there are three, I think, main sources of dollar generation. One is, of course, exports. And you have what we call the goods exports, like apparel, tea, rubber, all of that. Then you have export of services. The services component is growing organically. You have like the IT BPM, service exporters, even maritime, even some of our construction firms are now providing, services overseas, and that's getting recorded. So I think that is a good sign, and we're moving much more ahead of that. But on the goods side, we're kind of, even though last year we crossed the 13 billion mark, despite a year of the pandemic, no fuel, all of that, our exporters were quite resilient, and we crossed the 13 billion mark. But how can we get that 13 billion to 15 or even 20 billion? So that, I think, involves a mix of trying to make it more easier for exporters domestically, whether it's licenses, regulations, all of that being improved much more. And you don't need the IMF program for that. That's things that we can really do, that we can really promote, so that they don't find the burden here, because it's so difficult for when an exporter goes overseas to do the marketing, to find good buyers, and so on. So I think a lot can be done on that side. The other route for growth is also through trade agreements. I think a lot of the time even the private sector has somewhat shied away from free trade agreements, because we're really worried about what might flow into the country in terms of imports, but not really thinking what can we export out there and ask for a lesser duty rate or a tariff rate for that product. But I must say, in the last 12 months in particular, you're having a lot more, and even in our membership and general private sector, a lot more companies which were import dependent or purely importing and maybe doing a little value add and selling to the domestic consumer, now thinking, oh, hey, I need a dollar revenue, because I can't come into a situation like this when I'm totally dependent on the banks from, raising a payment or anything like that. So slowly we're getting inquiries of, okay, how can we use the Indian FTA? How can we use the South Asian Free Trade Agreement? How can we use the Pakistan FTA? Okay. So people are curious, exporters are curious. You're getting a lot more agriculture-related exporters as well. So they need to be coached into the standards and things like that, for example, because if you're exporting to the EU, there's a lot of standards, sustainability, all of that comes into play. But there is a shift, and I think that's a really good sign or a good positive coming out of the crisis. On the other two dollar revenue is, of course, tourism. So 2018, we saw the highest level of tourism arrivals, 2.3 million, and about 4 billion coming in. And we've not seen that level since. So I think this year, hopefully, I don't think we'll get to that level, but at least we can show that we're back, and there as well, really attracting I think a good mix of high spending tourists, because we have good offerings as well, and keeping the message consistent, marketing the country much better, maybe improving some of our product offerings. So I think the tourism element is going to be a big part of this recovery, and a lot of people who depended on tourism have not really seen much income in the last few years. So next few years are really crucial for their own survival and growth. And the other aspect is remittances.
Okay.
So I think that's where we've reached a peak of maybe $7 billion US dollars coming in almost each month. Last year it was $3.5 billion because of the currency related issues and those maybe not wanting to send through the banking system. But there also, I think it's really understanding what kind of migrant workers do we want to send out? Do we want to send out skilled, unskilled, trained ones who can drive our exports even? So I think that's where we need to get it right, not just think of a target of like 200,000 or 300,000 and that is our KPI, but really see, okay, even if they go out, is there a way for them to come back in 2-3 years and come back to maybe jobs that will keep them here as well.
But for everything that you just mentioned, Shiran, it is incumbent upon the government or the state to create an enabling environment. If you take tourism, tourists have to come here and feel safe.
Correct.
Right, and even if we talk about sending sending workers abroad, migrant workers, sometimes they are not aware of their rights. They don't know what to do if they go to some house abroad and get beaten up or raped or something. They don't know who to call.
Yeah.
So these protection mechanisms are also severely lacking.
Yeah.
And if we take entrepreneurship, for example, if there's a farmer in, say, Hambantota who has a plantation of amberella and he wants to make amberella jam and market it to Australia, what is the process? What is the standardization process? All of that, there is no proper guidance mechanism.
So just on your last one, on the umbrella one, I think there are even export houses that work on what you call a outgrow model. So they work with smaller farmers. Like if you have something in your backyard,
okay,
they will coach you. They will give you the seeds, the necessary guidelines. They might even do your certification as well. And a lot of companies are now exporting maybe say gherkins to say Japan,
right,
or particular cucumbers to Europe and all. So there are success stories.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes not too visible as well. But even for this farmer, I think there are financial instruments that need to come in, like crop insurance and things like that, which we've talked about, but not really implemented.
Yeah, microfinancing companies which don't act as predators when people can't make their payments on time. So there are systems in place, but they're not really functioning, and the people who are victimized are people at the lowest rungs of society.
Correct. So I think that's where it's important to the whole financial literacy side of it, economic literacy side of it. I think the recent survey by the central bank and even IFC showed financial literacy is around 52%. So even that is a crucial element of the whole way we elect people as well, because if we have improvement in, or at least people who understand the financial side of it a little bit better, you'll be able to read between the lines when your policymaker or your politician explains a particular thing, and you can question it without blindly accepting it like we have kind of right now.
We're on to our final 5 minutes of the show. One of the key things that I want your perspective on is, since we are on this journey of with the IMF towards Sri Lanka's economic recovery, what if we put in place all these legal mechanisms and structural reform processes, and then politically, if there's a shift, or when there are elections, I want to say when and not if, when there are elections, and if there is some kind of political shift, can a future political structure jeopardize all the positive shifts that have been done? And what must we do to sort of prevent it?
Sure. So I think that's the key risk that even the IMF on their report has identified.
Yeah.
Certain political shifts or even policy shifts which reverse things. So I think that is why it's important to get everyone's buy-in. We can shift the policy or the regulation or tweak it a little bit, but this is the goalpost. I think as long as we understand that this is the budget deficit that we want to get to, this is how much we need to raise from state-owned enterprise reform, these are the kind of legislations we want. I think there needs to be a minimum acceptance that we are in this for 10 years, and within that you will have political cycles and so on. So I think that buy-in needs to happen right now, because the real worries, we can't be complacent right now, but we have the opportunity to turn things around, similar to what countries like India did in 1991, when they ran out of reserves, and they used that opportunity to open up their market and do a lot of deregulation. What South Korea did as well, quite successfully. What countries like Georgia did, which is a country of 4 million people, but they managed to do a lot of difficult reform as well. And we can either be that, or we can really regress or shift back, as you said. Someone can come in and totally reverse, and then you become an Argentina, which every 4 or 5 years goes to the IMF, seeks bond restructures, and you lose total credibility. And I think credibility is the most important thing. So if you do that, we can, say bye-bye to foreign direct investment, all of that, and it'll be really crazy. Or we can go the more extreme, which is more of the Lebanon and some of these other countries, which where it's totally chaos as well. So I think it's a very important juncture, and I think it's important to understand it's not only the IMF, because you're also having other multilateral institutions, the World Bank, who will come and support, ADB, who will come and support, maybe the Asian Infrastructure Bank that will come and support, and maybe some of the other bilateral countries as well. So I think that willingness and support from the international community is there. It's just for us, the 225 and the 22 million people, we need to be able to demand much more and accomplish a lot more, so that we don't come back to an 18th program in 2 years' time or in 3 years' time, but maybe in 5-6 years' time, when we just need to do a few more other adjustments, and we are still on that path.
So everyone needs to get on board with this program. There's no other option, right? Everyone needs to get on board and make sure that there is a collective effort to ensure that these structural reforms, policy reform, all of this takes place. And something interesting that I caught on from Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy's opening remarks at a seminar I attended, which you moderated this afternoon, was he said that we need an implementation unit so that responsibility could be ascribed, targets could be set, monitored, structural benchmarks could be set, so that we could get on track. I think that's super important.
The Achilles heel of policy in Sri Lanka has been lack of implementation. So that is a key thing. There are different models that can work in this, but you basically need to get that legislation over. You need to be implementing. You need to have accountability so that you can even report what you've accomplished if you've deviated. So that's what he, I think, means by it. And that kind of a unit or something across government is really, really required.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. Before we go, 2 reminders. One is make sure you keep tuning in. The Central Bank Governor, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, is in the studio, and he'll be talking with my colleague Faraz Shaukat Ali in a few minutes from now. That's on Newsline. And at 9:30 p.m., we have this special edition of the People's Platform International Edition. I had the opportunity to speak with 4 international experts on, again, the IMF's role in Sri Lanka's economic recovery. We looked at it from a human rights perspective as well. So make sure you tune in at 9:30 as well. And if you are going out, since it's Friday night, make sure you watch the YouTube edition of it. Thank you very much, Shiran Fernando, for joining us on this edition of the show.
Pleasure as always.
All right. Have a safe weekend and good night.